I just draw a box around the kind of life that I want. As soon as work stuff goes outside of that box, I just have a blanket no. I don't have to follow this defined default path, which is that you work really hard and then you retire when you're 65. What does it mean to change your life? Usually what it means is that you've achieved some sort of outcome that you've been working towards. Often it takes a split second to make a decision. Some might say it takes 2 minutes to make a decision. The right decision can change your life.
I'm your host, Sarah Ann Macklin, and I'm on a mission to uncover the maze of health myths around nutrition and well-being and guide you through my 7 pillars of health. Join me on a journey of discovery and connection and pull up a pew for a front row seat to the most exclusive health conversations of our time. Welcome to Live Well, Be Well. One quick ask, please subscribe to this channel. The more subscribers we get, the bigger the guests will be. Ali Abdaal is the most followed productivity expert in the world, with over 5 million subscribers on YouTube. His new book, Feel Good Productivity, is a New York Times and Sunday Times bestseller. But first, I ask Ali, amongst all of his success that he's had, what is the one thing that he still struggles with?
There's 2 things that come to mind, really. One is health-related stuff. So I'd love to talk to you about that. I actually did a gym session earlier today because one of my goals for 2024 is to get into the best shape of my life. But staying consistent with health has been surprisingly hard, or weirdly hard. And the other thing is I feel like my whole thing is feel good productivity. And I find myself not wanting to do things that I don't like doing. And I think this is, even with all the stuff that I've read about productivity and writing a book about it, it's just really hard to get yourself to do something that you don't like doing. And so my team will sometimes joke about this, be like, Ali's got stuff in his calendar and he says he's going to do the thing, but he doesn't actually do the thing. So there's this sense of I really struggle with following through on stuff unless the thing is fun, in which case I'll just do it and I'll have a great time doing it. And if it's not fun, I'll try and find a way to make it fun. But even then, there are things we have to do that are not fun some of the time. And for those things, I continue to procrastinate on.
What are they? I really want to know what they are.
So when it came to book writing stuff, there were aspects of the editing process that I didn't quite enjoy, where I was like, okay, the research was really fun and putting it all together, but now I have to cut out half of what I've written. Okay, that seems kind of hard. If it's working with our team and it's our social media team has written stuff and I need to approve it, or if it's anything to do with admin, like filling out forms or anything, and I have an assistant to delegate stuff for that. But sometimes there are forms and contracts I have to read through that need my personal signature, and I'm like, I should probably read through this, and then it stays in the inbox for weeks at a time until I get the nudges on Slack, repeatedly being it needs to go in today, it needs to go in today. So for those sorts of things, I don't really get around to doing them because there's always something more interesting that I feel like I could be doing.
Well, you have a lot on.
Yeah, but I guess everyone does, don't they? I don't think anyone listening to this will feel as if they don't have a lot on. But yeah, that's the weird part.
Well, I think you wrote something in your book. I mean, you wrote a lot in your book, but something that really stood out to me was success doesn't lead to feeling good. Feeling good leads to success. Now, this is really entwines with what you're telling me, that actually the things that you're leaning into are the things that you're flourishing in, okay? Yeah. And when I read that, I really tried to kind of analyse, Aksha, and I've analysed this as part of my goals going forward this year. What are the things that I enjoyed spending my time on? What are the things that I enjoyed not spending my time on last year, and how can I reverse and look at that? How did you kind of come to that realization when you were writing it? Was there any kind of hard learnings that made you realize actually feeling good is the way to success?
Yeah. So initially, when I started writing the book, it was a very different book. It was called The Productivity Equation. And I was like, you know what? I'm writing a book. I want to make this highbrow. I want to have loads of research. And I came up with this equation for productivity and stuff and kind of worked on that for a whole year. And then I showed that book proposal to a guy called David, who's from New York, who worked with James Clear on Atomic Habits on the proposal.
Amazing.
And he looked at that and he was like, this stinks. It's not going to sell. And I was like, what? Spent a whole year working on this. And he was like, it's too complicated, man. No one wants to read a book called The Productivity Equation. I was like, okay. And he was like, look, just tell me this. You've had all this success. You were a doctor, you're a YouTuber, blah, 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 business, all that kind of stuff. If you had to boil it down to just one phrase, what's your secret? What were you doing that other people weren't doing? And I was like, oh, easy. I just found a way to make it fun. And he was like, great. So why the frick aren't you writing a book about that? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize I could write a book about how to make work fun. He was like, that's exactly what you should write it about. And apparently there's enough to write a book about that. So then when I dove into all the research, I realized that, oh, this isn't just me. This is a thing that loads of people have figured out over time. There's a bunch of evidence around it as well. Now it's anything I do where I struggle with, I try my best to make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so the gym, I'm actually becoming more consistent with it than I ever was before because I found a few different things I can do to make it a bit more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still not fully there. It's still not a thing that I would choose to do. It's a thing that I feel like I should do. And I'd love to get it into that, really into that zone of intrinsic motivation rather than like having to push myself into doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to feel as if I'm pulled towards the gym. But I haven't quite figured that one out yet.
I mean, it's one of those things. I'm trying to think about what I hate. Now, I know you're very good at this, but for me, anything on maths and accounts is what I hate. How can I try and make that more fun? Because when I look at that, I would not know where to start. So I really get the concept, but the things that I really hate, I'm trying to think, how do I make that fun? How do I make doing my accounts fun?
Nice. Okay. So I love this. So I run myself through the 3 Ps whenever I have this. So play, power, and people. So the first question I would ask you is, could you approach it with more of a spirit of play? Like, what would it look like if you had to have a more playful attitude to approach your accounts?
What would it look like to have a more playful account? I mean, I feel like it's a very specific way I have to approach my accounts, where I have to sit down, open my laptop, and be very focused on numbers. And that to me terrifies me, because being a dyslexic and having numbers next to me is something that I just don't get any joy from. So I try to have meetings with my accountant to take that fear away. Still doesn't analyze play for me though.
Okay. Let's think about this. So how much seriousness are you attaching to these accounts? Like,
Quite a lot, because you could go to jail if you get them wrong.
Yeah, you could.
I feel like I'm really trying to test you here on how I could do this for me.
This is good stuff. Okay, so you could go to jail if you get them wrong, and you have an accountant who's going to help you in the process.
Yeah.
And like, what do these meetings with the accountant look like? Like, how do they work?
They are about a 30-minute call.
Yeah.
Where we go through my monthly reports, anything that I need to change, check over my expenses, my kind of outgoings, all of my tax, and then we'll kind of reiterate and go back every month on these things.
And you do them as calls? Could you do them in person?
As calls. We could do them in person.
I mean, I only ever meet with my accountants in person.
Do you?
We've got a meeting next week, and it's like once a quarter.
Okay.
Because I was like, I just can't be bothered to deal with a call every month. And they were like, you know what? We'll just come to you every person in person every 3 months, and it's like an hour and a half. We always do it with lunch, because I find that having food on the table makes dealing with accounts more like exciting in some way. It makes it feel as if it's a social outing.
Yeah, you're right.
And then they'll bring the laptop, they'll bring the printouts of stuff, they'll have highlighted the relevant bits, and I'll just comment on relevant things.
Okay.
So I quite enjoy I kind of look forward to the accountant meetings, because it's
a fun lunch.
It's a fun lunch, yeah. So could that kind of approach apply to...
That could work, yeah.
The other thing that I like to do on calls in particular is I like to put background music on my Zoom calls.
Okay.
So I'll have my AirPods in or whatever, and I'll open up YouTube and I'll find they've got these like Lord of the Rings ambient type soundtracks where someone has just put all the bangers from Lord of the Rings together in a 3-hour-long playlist. And I just put that on as a YouTube video and like dial the volume down so it's like background music. So what that does is like the other person can't hear it because it's only coming through my headphones. Sometimes I do share sound if I'm with my team because they like to hear it as well. But anything that you say or that someone says with like the concerning hobbits or like the Shire theme in the background just sounds way more fun and way more epic. So whenever I have to get through a call, put on the background music, it makes it feel a little bit more fun. When it comes to calls, another thing I like to do is I won't take them from home sometimes if I know if it's gonna be a boring call. So for example, I had a call before coming here and I went down to the local pub called The Pig and the Butcher on Liverpool Road in Islington. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to order lunch here. So I took the call while having lunch with a coffee and some water and the background music and stacked up all those things to make doing the call much more fun. So it's like, those are the sorts of things that I personally like to play around with when it comes to, if I know there is something I have to do, it's a little bit boring, it's a little bit draining. Can I find a way to just not do the thing? Could I delegate it to someone on my team? But if I have to do it, then like, what are all the things I can do to just try and approach it with a little bit more of a sense of play?
Yeah. I like that. Okay, I'm going to start taking my 2024 goal to have lunch with my accountant.
Nice.
I'll let you know how
That's
that goes.
a good one. Yeah, they're quite fun to have lunch with. Then you can ask them weird questions to be like, so what does offshoring mean? And then they get all like, well, technically we can't talk about that, but like off the record we can talk about it. It's just kind of fun.
So something that flips on play.
Yeah.
And I don't like using this word, but I think it's really important just to touch upon this because, you know, we're having this conversation. Beginning of the year, so many people are thinking, you know, what have I not achieved in 2023? What do I want to achieve in 2024? And that can set us up for sometimes a failure, these high expectations that we have, right? And I know that you've written in your book that failure is to try something new. And I love that line. It's an invitation to try something new. I want to know, what's been one of your hardest failures to date?
The word failure almost seems like I never think of the word failure in my mind.
I know,
So
and
it's like I'm trying to think back to what would someone else call a failure that I would have called like just part of the process or
or one of those,
yeah.
or one of those moments, because I know that you've done a whole YouTube video on failure last year or 2022,
Yeah.
and I really loved watching that. And that's why I found it really hard to kind of ask this question in that tone, because I agree that a failure is always an invitation to learn something new. But I always think that from the outside, everyone must think, this guy's got it all together when you do on Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah.
And we never really see these big failures. So I wondered, like from last year, looking back or just over time, what has been one of the biggest things that you look back and say, maybe it was your biggest learning experience?
Sarah, I'm so sorry to cut in, but since Live Well, Be Well is all about health and well-being, I need to tell you what great mental shape I'm in today.
Since we started producing this podcast, it seems that you've been on quite a health journey. And seeing you blossom honestly fills me with joy.
My sleep cycle's on point, my gut microbiome is in better shape than ever. I'm even doing HIIT workouts, can you believe it? But the reason I rudely interrupted this interview is to tell you about the adaptogenic coffee that you've suggested to me earlier this week, which contains lion's mane mushroom and rhodiola. Two things I personally don't know much about. Perhaps you can enlighten me.
Science shows that lion's mane mushroom is known to improve memory, mental clarity, concentration, and overall just your brain health. And rhodiola is a powerful adaptogen known for its effects on stress levels and brain functioning.
Okay, that's all sounding very exciting indeed, and I can confirm these shroomy coffees are absolutely delicious, and they come in these single sachets, which is incredibly convenient. But I don't really understand what makes them so special, so what exactly is adaptogenic coffee?
The medicinal mushrooms and coffee are probably one of the most perfect pairings. You get all the benefits of regular coffee, which we do love, whilst minimizing any side effects. So why does this happen? I know you're going to ask. Caffeine is a nootropic. It increases our alertness and our attention. But many of us will have experienced the increased levels of the stress hormone cortisol, which results in, sadly, the jitters and anxiety.
This has 100% worked wonders for me this week, so where can people get them?
Okay, so if you want to try these at home, we have a special discount code from the amazing brand London Nootropics, and they have 3 different blends to choose from. So listen up, Sam. Here is your mix. You can have Zen. It's probably the most balancing. It's great if you're caffeine sensitive. Then you've got Mojo. This is perfect for that natural boost. If you're feeling a bit fatigued, it makes a really good pre-workout because of the cordyceps and also, get this, the Siberian ginseng. And my favourite, to experience the effects of lion's mane and rhodiola, get yourself some of the Flow Blend.
We've got a bit of a treat for the listeners, right? A discount code?
Yes, we do, Sam. And I know that you love it because you love a discount. So all you need to do is use the code LiveWellBeWell to get 20% off at londonnootropics.com. A box of each blend is only £15, so you're kind of getting a very good deal here. And subscription starts at £12 a month, delivered straight to your door.
One of the biggest learning experiences was when we had to fire 5 people from my team on one day. This was like 2 years ago now. And that was like probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Like during the pandemic, the business was doing really well. Our course sales were going through the roof. And I thought money grows on trees, as everyone did during the pandemic. And we ended up overhiring, and I made the mistake of essentially not like getting advice from people who were more senior or more experienced than I was. I just thought, first principles, we just need to do this, and this in the team. Of course, we'll just hire another 8 people overnight and just make it happen. But I didn't realize that when you add people to a team, you're not just adding them to do the work. You're also adding a bunch of complexity and communication and overheads and everything kind of ground to a halt. And it was really fun because we had more people in the office and we were just like hanging out. But we weren't really getting any more work done. In fact, we were publishing like half as many videos as when I was just on my own working full-time on the side.
Wow.
Say working full-time on the side, yeah. It was weird. Like the more people we added, the less productive overall our business became. And then we had a course launch that did like less than half of the projected revenue. And then we were like, wait a minute. All of our financial projections for the year, when we do this lunch with our accountants, these were all based on like actually hitting 100% of our targets. That was dumb. We should have done our projections pessimistically rather than optimistically. And we were like, oh crap, we actually cannot afford to have these people on the team. And then it was like a long, protracted 5-day period where me and a few others in the team were in a room and we're trying to figure out who was going to make the cut and who wasn't going to make the cut, and like what roles were redundant and what roles weren't. And it was like the hardest week of all of our lives, because these were all people that we were friends with, and they had like great vibes, and we had such a great time in the office. But at the end of the day, we had to make the decision. I had to make the decision that was right for the business. And from that point on, I was like, okay, I now understand what it feels like to fire someone. So I'm not going to hire people with as much like, I'm going to have a way higher bar for hiring someone and letting them pass their probation period, because I don't want to have to go through that again. So that taught me a lot about like building a team and realizing that actually having a bigger business is not necessarily a better thing.
Well, you spoke about that actually in your failure video. I hate calling it a failure video. I'm going to say your like greatest lessons, because you said, when is enough enough?
Yeah. Mate, think about that all the time.
And doing a lot of research for this and looking back on kind of previous conversations, you had quite an in-depth conversation about that with Stephen on his show. And it kind of got to talking about, well, when is enough money? And I found that a really interesting conversation between you two, and then listening to this part of your video, because you kind of, in the conversation with Stephen, was still figuring out what is enough. And then when I watched it kind of a year later, you doing this one, you said actually not going above 12 people, not hitting above this threshold, having a lifestyle company is actually what I want. And not having this huge growth, a 50-person company, is not what I want. And I think it's really important actually to analyse and understand what we do want, because I think we can draw upon what we see out there to be hyper successful, and then think we need that to be success. So how do you rally up what is enough right now for you?
I still haven't figured this out. Well, I in fact, I don't think there is something to ever figure out with this. I think this is, like, from having spoken to a bunch of people over the years who deal with this problem. It's very much a first world problem. So let's just put that caveat aside. But there's always
It is, but I also want to interrupt, because it can also spiral you. So it's a first world problem in, how much money do I want to make? But I also think you can completely self-destruct if you don't start having a realization on this question.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can actually have more poor mental health problems because you're always wanting more, rather than understanding where that comfortableness for you sits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think actually everyone has this trade-off in their lives of like, do I make a decision that helps me make more money, or do I make a decision that helps me be more balanced? And usually the make more money is, I will take that job I don't like that pays better, or I'll work harder, or I'll work longer hours. And usually the balance thing involves working less rather than working more. Like the happiest doctors I've ever seen are the ones working 2 or 3 days a week. I have not met a single happy doctor who works 5 or 6 days a week. Because it's just, it's kind of hard to have a balanced and fulfilling life if you're working 5 or 6 days a week. The best advice I got from this was from James Clear when I put this question to him on a random Zoom call. He was like super gracious, helping me out with the book and stuff. And he said, I was like, how do you do it, man? Like, you're chilling, you've got all these book sales. Why aren't you building the Atomic Habits Academy to run online courses? Why aren't you giving all these talks? Why aren't you running your own in-person conferences like Tony Robbins? Like, what's stopping you from doing all that stuff? And what he said was, I just draw a box around the kind of life that I want. And with as long, and if work stuff fits within that box, then sure, I'll try and maximize how much money I make. But as soon as work stuff goes outside of that box, I just have a blanket no to that thing. So for him, he knows that every morning he wants to take his kids to school. Every afternoon he wants to pick them up from school. And then once the kids are at home, he doesn't want to do anything that's work-related anymore. So that limits his working hours from like 10 a.m. till like 2 p.m. That's like a 4-hour window. He's like, cool, if it's within that 4-hour window, and I've told myself I'll only travel once a month to give a talk somewhere. If it's within that 4-hour window, or if it's once a month, sure, let's try and make as much money as possible. But outside of that, who cares? And I really like that framing of it, because it's not like he's not saying he doesn't want to be ambitious, or he doesn't want to make more money or sell more books or write more books. He's saying he wants to do all those things, but on his own terms. And so I've been thinking a lot about that. What's that box for myself? And I think for me, it's where I feel like I don't have to spend very much time in the week doing things that drain me, or doing things that I don't like doing, and where my calendar is broadly empty to be able to learn the things that I like learning and share them on my own terms with my audience. And so what that means is, like, if, for example, I know we could make more money by just making more videos about making passive income. People love that shit, making passive income online. And I've made a few videos about it, but I don't want to make every video I make about passive income, even though it would grow the channel faster and even though it would make more money, because that's not the sort of YouTube channel I want to have. It's just not. It doesn't resonate with me internally. So I've been trying to find what are the boundaries of that box within which I can optimize.
So what would you say is the Ali Abdaal master plan from thinking about that?
Nice. Insofar as that there is a master plan, it's like I want to make sure that A, the calendar is broadly empty. B, I can follow my own energy in terms of the things I want to film. And C, that the revenue of the business and the profits of the business over time become decoupled from me just showing up and filming more videos. So that's the thing that we're trying to work on for this year. We're trying to release a productivity club, like an online membership type thing, which is sort of like exercise classes, but for productivity. So we'll host like a weekly review session and a monthly goal setting session and co-working sessions over Zoom so people can focus with their tasks. And I would join for some of those sessions, but not for all of them. And so what we're trying to do is create a thing that can add value to people's lives and that can make us money without me having to be overly involved. That's what we're trying to figure out. But yeah, who knows if we'll get there.
When I read this and just parts of what you're saying, and you mentioned her name, but who you do resemble a little bit to me of is the Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week. When everyone read that and everyone all of a sudden realised that work doesn't have to be this laborious task and actually they can find how they want to organise and map their life. I feel like I remember everyone reading that 10 years ago being like, right, that's it, I'm going to make my master plan. But there is parts of that within how you approach your life, I think.
Yeah, honestly, that's the single most impactful book on my life. I read it when I was like 17. So what was that? Like 12 years ago now. My goodness, I'm old. And it basically turned me onto the idea that, wait a minute, I don't have to follow this defined default path, which is that you work really hard and then you retire when you're 65 with osteoarthritis in both your knees. And actually, if I could build a business that, made quick passive income that was able to sustain a fairly modest lifestyle, now I can just do what I want. And that means I don't need to wait till retirement to be able to do what I want. I can just do it now, which means I can be like, what are the things that actually fulfill me? What sort of work would I actually want to be doing if I wasn't so concerned about making money? Or if I wasn't so concerned about status or climbing the whatever status hierarchy, etc. So thank you, Tim Ferriss, for offering that as a service to the world, because I think so many people can trace their own origin story back to the 4-Hour Work Week.
Completely. And I think something that can really, I guess, overwhelm people, I think that's the word that I want to use when people are thinking about starting any journey that's entrepreneurial or kind of doing something out of the box, is getting over that fear of starting. It's quite a big thing that there's feels that there's, people looking at you now, there's been 10 years of you building up slowly and chipping away at building to where you are now. But something I really like that you said, and I've heard you say it a few times, is that it only takes 2 minutes to change your life.
Yeah.
Hearing that all of a sudden just kind of strips all these boundaries where you're like, okay, all of these barriers to entry when you're thinking about starting anything, and it could be a habit, it could be going to the gym, it could be increasing your health. It doesn't have to be business led. Okay, so your kind of big one today one of them was a health goal that you want to achieve. If you're looking at your health goals and you're thinking that you want to achieve a very kind of high optimal health goal, such as entering a 10K race, but you struggle to run for a couple of minutes, that can feel very overachievable. And it can all of a sudden make you not want to do it. So when I heard that on what you said, it felt very empowering. So can you talk to the listeners a bit about why it can only take 2 minutes to change your life?
Yeah, I think this 2-minute thing, like there's a few different levels on which it applies, which is why I like that phrase so much. On one level, what does it mean to change your life? Usually what it means is that you've achieved some sort of outcome that you've been working towards. And the way you achieved that particular outcome, whether it's, starting a business or running that 10K or whatever the thing might be, the way you achieved that outcome was through taking action and ideally taking that action consistently over time. But how did you decide to take the action in the first place? You decided to take the action because of a period of decision where you made the decision, like, you know what, in 2024, I'm going to run that 10K, or in 2024, I'm going to start that business, or I'm going to write that book, or whatever the thing might be. There was that time where you made that decision. And often it takes a split second to make a decision. Some might say it takes 2 minutes to make a decision. And so in that sense, like, the right decision can change your life, because the decisions that we make about what we want to pursue and what goals we want to achieve massively changes the direction that we travel. it would be a very different year for you if, for example, you decided you wanted to run an ultra marathon compared to if you decided you wanted to, I don't know, make a millionaire in passive income or something, like whatever the thing might be. It just takes you in radically different directions. But the point is, it's just 2 minutes to make that decision, and ideally that decision then leads to action, which then leads to results, which leads to you feeling like you've changed your life. But I think the other way in which it just takes 2 minutes to change your life is that it comes down to this action level. Anything that we want to do requires some kind of action and requires that action consistently over time. But what a lot of the research shows us is that starting an action is way harder than continuing to do it. So for me, if I struggle getting to the gym, the first 2 minutes of actually just like putting on my workout clothing and actually just leaving the house to get to the gym, that is by far the hardest part. And once I'm on the way to the gym, I'm like, oh, I might as well just like get there. And once I'm there, I'm like, I might as well just like do some sets. And while I'm there, I might as well, play some music or listen to a podcast or whatever and enjoy the process. But it's that initial 2 minute where it's like, oh, it's cold, it's snowing outside. I did a workout yesterday as well. I don't really want to do this. And just making that decision in those 2 minutes to take action makes all of the rest follow. And so just as a general tip, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, like what I do whenever I'm struggling with procrastination from something is I will either set a 2 minute timer on my phone or put on a song that's exactly 5 minutes long, like Bohemian Rhapsody. I'll just put it on Spotify and just think, you know what, I'm just going to do this for the duration of the song. And that will get me started. And then 80% of the time, I'll just keep going with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any key mental models that you use in those 2 minutes? So when you sit down to think about how you're going to reflect on a question or something that's come up, do you have any kind of key mental models that you go through?
Yeah, I have like a bank of journaling prompts in my head and also written down that I often think about whenever this is when I'm in the mode of like figuring out what to do. This was going to be what the book was going to be about. It was kind of the idea of the pilot and the plane. The pilot being kind of the mode that we're in when we're planning what we're going to do, and the plane being the mode that we're in when we're just executing on it and following the instructions of the pilot. And I think one of the issues that a lot of people have with their productivity is that they try and do both at the same time. It's like you get to the gym and then when you're there, you're like, oh, I need to figure out what workout to do. So much easier if you decide ahead of time, this is the workout I'm going to do. And then you show up to the gym and you just do the thing that has already been pre-programmed in your app or in your notes app or whatever the thing might be. Similarly, I think for a lot of people, for me at least, the start of the day is when I have that mental clarity. I'm having my coffee and I'm thinking, what do I want to do today? That's when I look at my calendar and I decide, okay, cool. First 2 hours doing this, then I'm going to do gym session, then I'm having lunch there, then I've got a podcast, and then I'm doing a talk tonight. Sick. That's the day planned. And all it takes, again, 2 minutes just to plan your day in the morning. That honestly is the single best productivity hack for the vast majority of people. Just spend 2 minutes in the morning planning what your day is going to look like. So when I'm in pilot mode, I'll be asking myself some questions. I'll be looking at my calendar. And if I see that there are gaps of time where I don't have anything scheduled, I'll be thinking, what is the most important thing I could be doing? Or like, what is my core focus for 2024 in like the work domain, for example? And what is the one action that I can take that would get me closest to that? So, for example, one of our goals is to build this productivity club in work for 2024. And so when I have a spare block of time in the calendar, I'm thinking, okay, what could I possibly do in that time that would move me the closest to that goal in the shortest amount of time? And that's usually the thing that I try and do in that time. Because it's so easy to do the fake work of like, oh, it'd be really cool to do some more research or whatever. But usually doing more research is not actually the thing that's going to move you closer to your goal.
It's more the actions and the doing. Something that I loved within your book was the people element that you brought in. It really resonated with so much of my core values. So a lot of what I've kind of built and a lot about this podcast, right, is about human connection. Yeah. I love being with people, get a lot of energy from people. And I love the opening line when you said how some people can uplift your energy and how others can basically deflate it. And I think so many of us can just go through our lives unaware that this is such an important part of how we work, play, everything.
You're probably listening to this show because you care about your health, both physical and mental. That's why I created Live Well, Be Well, to share new ways to think about your health. I want to talk to you quickly about something that we all experience, and that is stress. Now, we can all get stressed about a host of things, even the minor things. And stress triggers the primal response. So even simply sitting in a meeting or traffic can trigger this. This brings me on to something called the vagus nerve, and it is incredibly important within the stress response and for calming our primal brains. This device I've been using is called Sensate. Now, it's a wearable touch therapy device. Research has proven that the vagus nerve activation calms the brain medulla responsible for stress and anxiety. Sensate is a device which uses infrasound resonance, and when paired with the sessions in the Sensate companion app, it helps reduce stress and improve overall well-being. In 10 or 30-minute sessions, you can feel an incredible sense of peace, reducing all those small moments of feeling stress or anxiety throughout your day. This device is genuinely a piece of modern magic and such an exciting step in modern well-being technology. It makes the perfect gift, or even better, a self-care purchase. To experience a sense of calm at home, work, or even commuting with your busy lifestyle,
Just go to getsensate.com.
and use the code SarahAnn to get 10% off your first order.
Something that I find really interesting is how do you, or how can you give advice to our listeners on how people can open up those networks to the ones that actually help not deflate them, that energize them? I think it's a really hard question to answer, but it's one of those ones that some people can feel very fearful of stepping into that realm of meeting new people and understanding how they can draw energy from others. So do you have any tips around that?
Yeah, this is a hard one because it's going to depend on people's circumstances. Like, for a lot of people, you can't just cut out the energy draining people in your life because they're your co-workers and maybe it's not your own company or
their
they're your
family.
family members. Exactly. The thing I would say is, in all of these contexts, figure out like what are the things under your control and focus on those. So one thing everyone can control is everyone can try their best to become an energizer themselves. There's this idea that, we're talking about this thing, relational energy, the energy we get from the people around us. And, organizational psychologists have done studies in companies where they do this sort of energy map and they ask everyone, like, who are the people in the organization who are giving you energy and who are the ones draining your energy? And they find that you get these clusters of people who are like the core energizers, where everyone wants to work with them, everyone likes being around them, they get better promotions, they get better ratings from their managers. All of the good things happen to people who uplift the energy of others around them. And so the first question I would say to anyone listening to this is, do you think you are one of those energizing people? If the answer is no, then there are things that you can do to uplift your own energy so that you can increase the energy of the people around you. Because if the people around you feel, you feel like they're draining your energy and then you're going into that negative spiral, then you become an energy drain on others. Now the good vibes people don't want to hang out with you because you're an energy, because you're sucking their energy. So how can you like give yourself that like little push that you need to become more of an energizer? And there's like really fairly simple ways of doing this. One of my team members and I were talking about this, and he discovered the strategy when he was working in consulting and applied it to this job as well. Of like whenever you're greeting someone, just like be more effusive than you think you should. If someone comes into the door, Sarah, oh my goodness, it's so great to see you. Like, even if I'm putting that on, as long as I'm not doing it in a sarcastic tone, that is pretty energizing. Who doesn't want to be greeted by someone who's like effusively greeting them? When you're starting a Zoom meeting or something, like go in with high energy. I had a meeting that I was on just now where I was thinking like, oh, it's a bit low energy. Like, come on, guys. Then I went on there. I just spoke up a little bit louder. It's kind of weird for the people in the pub because I was sitting in the pub, but I was like, who cares? Like, I want to uplift the energy in the Zoom meeting because there's like a meeting shouldn't be boring. It shouldn't feel like it's draining everyone's energy. And the problem is if someone kind of talks softly, then the next person will, then the next person will, then the next person will. And it starts to feel socially awkward to be like, all right, guys, so let's talk about, whatever's happening next. And so I think the thing that we can always control is the energy with which we show up to situations in. And, often you'll find, people who are energizers will find that other energizers also want to kind of start hanging out with them. I think that's one way to do it, short of like cutting out your friends and family and coworkers already.
But I think there's that realization of just who you end up spending more time with, right? And I think cutting out feels really harsh, but it's about kind of reprogramming where your boundaries are. And I think it's such a big thing that sometimes we feel that we have to keep all of our friendship groups or our co-workers, whoever it is around us, just to appease everyone. But actually, we very rarely look at how we're feeling in that situation. Yeah. And so it's about taking I feel, or I've learned, it's about taking a bit more of a self-compassionate approach towards myself and thinking, okay, who in these moments actually make me feel really good? And when we are more deflated, to maybe not spend time with those people that actually do deflate us more.
Yeah,
it's just about picking your battles. But I loved that you put that in your book because I think, and I don't know if you feel like this being an entrepreneur and a YouTuber, because a lot of that can feel quite lonely. And so it's quite hard to energize yourself every day. I don't know if you find that, but I find that really hard to energize myself all the time if you're on your own.
Yeah.
How do you kind of work around that?
Yeah,
How do
honestly,
you motivate yourself?
I think really it's all about people. These days I'm on a bit of a digital nomad traveling thing around the world, and it would be very easy to just stay in the hotel room or stay in the Airbnb. But I know that like, if it gets to the morning after I've had coffee and a shower, I need to leave the house. Because if I'm in the house, then I found that on the days where I'm just in the house all day, it's just a bit grim, and I'm like, what am I doing? Whereas, so what I'll do is I'll go to the local coffee shop, go to the local pub, go to the public library, which is often free, join a co-working space, that kind of thing. Have a WeWork all-access membership. So in almost every city I find myself in, I just look at where's the nearest WeWork. Great, let's just go there. Because there's people around, there's free coffee, it's good vibes, there's usually natural light. And I find that leaving the house and making sure I'm out and about somewhere where there are people around is just a complete hack in terms of getting more energy from everything that I do. If it's impossible to do that, I will join like these Zoom co-working sessions. There's this thing called London Writers Salon that hosts 4 times a day. It's completely free Zoom co-working sessions where you can just hop on, and there's 5 minutes of like motivational spiel at the start by the host, and then you work for like 50 minutes, and then there's 5 minutes of motivational spiel at the end of it. And it's kind of nice. You just see like a few hundred people on a Zoom call with you, and you're just like doing whatever work you want to do. Even if I'm not writing, I sometimes join those. We have those within our team as well. We'll just open up a Slack huddle to be like, we have like a co-working channel where if anyone wants to join the Slack huddle, they'll just join. And there's something even just about working, knowing that someone else is on the other end of the line and you can see their face on camera, and you're doing your work, they're doing their work, and maybe you're sharing the same Lord of the Rings background music. There's something about that feels way more energizing than just doing it solo. That's how I do it.
It's an energy.
Yeah.
It's an energy thing, I think. And I think you can get very locked in your own mind when you're on your own. But I do think we are becoming hyper disconnected. Yeah. And it's a really big thing, I think. Essentially for my productivity anyway, I find it really important. And I also think something that you lean in from other people is that you start seeing actually, and I don't know if you find this, but you actually start seeing where people also are having their fears, or where their strengths lie and where their weaknesses lie. Because I think a lot of the time we look internally at where our weaknesses are as opposed to our strengths. And a lot of that from your book that I'm reading is a lot of our procrastination lies in our fears.
Yeah, procrastination is a fun one.
I resonate with that a lot because being a dyslexic, I never thought I'd be a podcaster, never thought I'd be a public speaker. And actually, it's something that I had to dive headfirst into to get over. And now I love it. Yeah. But for years, and people might not believe this, but I went to speech therapy. Yeah. It was something that I was quite terrified about. And so then having people judge me on that in a room or on a show terrified me. But the more I did it, the more I started to love it. But I did put it off for a very, very long period of time just because I was scared of the reaction and probably my self-esteem being pushed down more and my ego, right? It's all kind of all interconnected. So can you talk to me a bit about procrastination? Because it's one of the biggest questions that when I put on my Instagram that you were coming on, a ton of questions came in around this.
I absolutely love interviews like this one, which give you so much useful advice for your own life. And if it's helped you, this is an invitation to join my inner circle. It will give you exclusive access to a host of things: expert written articles, nutritious, delicious recipes, your own Members Hub newsletter, Podcast Plus, and also products and discounts decided by me for you. For one very small investment, it will help guide and support your health. If you use the code SAMCommunity, you can get 20% off your Inner Circle membership. Just head to www.sarahannmacklin.com.
Procrastination is almost always an emotional problem. That's what I've realized through the years of researching this. There's kind of 3 things that are at the root of it. There's uncertainty, fear, and inertia. So the first step, usually it's an emotional problem, but the first step I usually like to talk people through if I'm like coaching someone through this is, okay, tell me something that you're procrastinating on. So I wonder if, does anything come to mind, something you're procrastinating on, or something our listeners might use as an example?
What am I
just sort of talk through this?
What am I procrastinating? I can tell you I'm procrastinating on my accounts.
Okay, nice.
No, I mean, I really struggle to there's a couple of things. I really struggle to kind of go to my accounts when they send me through all my reviews and actually open it and action it
Yep.
because I'm terrified of it.
Sure.
And so I just don't want to look at it.
Okay.
And then I'll put in a call with my accountant last minute because I know I have to do it. And then also like things like admin, like my car insurance. I'm really putting that off as well, just because it's just such a laborious task to go through.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So it's like for each of these, for both of these examples, there's a few things that we can kind of talk through. And so if we talk through car insurance as an example, then maybe listeners can like apply that to whatever they're struggling with. The first one is uncertainty. So usually people struggle with procrastination when they have a little bit of uncertainty about what exactly they're doing and when they're planning to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So what would the car insurance involve? Like, what do you actually have to do?
It's one of those things. And I know you said you're quite bad with forms and admin. I'm quite bad with forms and admin. And I think that's part of it, that a new quote's come up. For some reason, it's ridiculously more expensive, I guess, because of inflation. And so I'm like, I can't just renew that. I'm going to have to go through the laborious task of finding out where I can get better car insurance. And it's just that kind of slot where I'm sitting down and I'm not wanting to do it because it's not fun. So I just keep putting it off. It's on my list of priorities where it is, it's up next week, so I really need to do it. But it's just slowly not kind of coming up on my to-do list at all. I just kind of skip it.
Okay, interesting. So the thing that I found whenever I have this problem is I don't like to-do lists, because to-do lists give you too much of an option to reprioritize things. And to-do lists also let you just keep on adding shit to the top or the bottom of it because they're infinite. If I ever want to do something, it just needs to go in the calendar. So I would ask you, do you have a half an hour slot in your calendar called sort out my car insurance? Yes.
I don't, but I will do after this.
Yeah, so often that's all it takes. Often like just putting a half an hour slot in the calendar to just do the thing is all that people need to just do the thing.
That's so interesting because I talk about that with health goals.
Oh, really?
So I mean, I feel like we're on the other side of the panel, but it's one of those things that how you're talking about just work, I talk about health. So food prep, making sure that you put in a slot when you can actually go and buy your food, prep and prioritize that for an hour on a Sunday takes away all the stress of you having to think about it every day or trying to find the time to do it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things I'll always put in when I'm going to the gym. You'll see I've got yoga on a Monday, resistance training on a Wednesday, run on a Friday. It's like one of those things that's just built into my calendar.
Yeah, I've started doing that as well. That was one of the main things I realized was that was such a needle mover for getting me to go to the gym more often. And now every week I just look at my calendar and I'm like, have I got at least 3 or 4 gym sessions in? And if not, I'm like, okay, can I move some things around or whatever? And I just put the slots in my calendar. So this morning, for example, 9 till 11 was like a work session, actually a Zoom co-working session with my team because it's just fun. And then 11 till like 12:30 was a gym session. So I was like, where's the local gym? Went to the gym group in like Angel. Did leg day because that was what came up next in my workout thing. And I was like, oh God, it's leg day. But hey, it's on the workout thing. I'm just gonna do it. And I was listening to a podcast and then joining a team Zoom call for half of it, just to make the process just a little bit more fun. But I think time blocking the thing and just putting it in the calendar often gets rid of most procrastination worries. When it comes to stuff like car insurance, when it comes to things like writing my first book or starting my YouTube channel, where there's way more emotional hurdles to doing the thing, than just putting it in the calendar often is not the only thing that helps. But yeah, just like what is the thing and when are you going to do it? It gives you the clarity that you need to get over the initial hurdle of procrastination. Then we come to the emotional side of it, where it's like, there's often some sort of fear or self-doubt that's holding us back. I suspect with your car insurance, it's more like it's just a bit painful and a bit dull, rather than, oh my God, I'm terrified of speaking to someone on the phone.
100%. That's exactly what it is. It's just a laborious task that I'm just not wanting to do, and I just need to get my act together and do it.
Yeah, quite. So it's not really fear that's holding you back in that context. No. With a lot of people though, like for example, we know people who procrastinate from going to the gym because they're worried they're going to be judged by people in the gym, even though in reality no one's doing any judging. But like the fear is there; it's so strong. And so in that context, what's really useful is seeing a therapist about it, but also journaling about it and just really putting down on paper exactly what the fear is. I'm afraid of going to the gym because I'm scared that people at the gym will laugh at me for being out of shape. And like, usually when you see thoughts written down like that, they lose some of their power because like the rational mind then looks at it and thinks, that doesn't sound right. Like, is that really the thing I'm scared of? Like when it sounds a bit childish, like when I put it down on paper. So step 1 is kind of naming the fear. Step 2, I find, is sort of just trying to do whatever it takes to reduce it. one thing I often tell myself is basically no one cares. No one cares anywhere near as much as we think they do. When I first started my YouTube channel, it took me 7 years to make my first video. You think from thinking
7 years.
Yeah, when I was what was it? In like 2010, I was like, I want to be a YouTuber, and I was watching all these music YouTubers, and every summer I was like, this is the summer I'm going to make my first YouTube video. This is the summer. No, this is the summer. This is the summer. And I kept putting it off. And I was like, oh no, I haven't got the right camera gear. I haven't got the right microphone. It's like, oh, I don't know how to do this. And it was 2017 that I made my first YouTube video. Because there was all this, subconscious fear of like judgment and fear of it not being good enough and the perfectionism and all that kind of stuff. And then I filmed a video and I realized it got 0 views. No one's going to see it. It's like when you're a brand new channel with no videos on your channel, like you're going to get 0 views from the algorithm. And I chose not to share the video with anyone. So it literally got 0 views. So I realized, no one actually cares. It's not like people are just refreshing YouTube and searching Ali Abdaal in the hope that one day I'll start a YouTube channel and they'll see my video and laugh at it. Genuinely, no one gives a shit. Like, people are all too worried about their own lives. So then I made another, 2017. I think I made like 20 videos. And I started getting a few views here and there. It's like, oh, we've got 12 views this time. And, they were educational videos. So the 12 people viewing them were like, oh, this is actually kind of helpful. And it was only after like my 25th video that I posted the fact that I had a YouTube channel on Facebook. Because I was so worried, oh my God, what are my friends and family going to think? I realized no one gave a fuck. No one cared. They were just like, cool, moved on with their day because everyone's busy. I was like, wow. Spent 7 years worrying about what the people would think of my YouTube channel and no one does. That's cool. And I think in general, the more experiences like this people have in their lives as they get older, the more they realize this is just true across the board. So it's very rare to meet someone in their 50s who still cares what people think of them. Because they've just had life go through them so much. They're like, oh, yeah, I stopped caring what people thought about me long ago. But when we're in our teens, when we're in our 20s, early 30s some of the time, we still have that crippling fear of like, oh shit, what will people think of me? And no one does. So I try and tell myself no one cares. And another practical thing people can do to overcome fear is it's something called the Batman effect. This is something I talk about in the book. There's a really cool study they did on kids in like kindergarten or something. And they split them into a bunch of different groups. And one of the groups, they told, just do the task as normal, whatever the thing was. And one of the groups, they said, imagine you're your favorite cartoon character, like Dora the Explorer or Batman, for example, and just do the thing as if you are that character. And they found that the group that was pretending like they were this cartoon character, they performed better on the task and they enjoyed it more. So it's like they were feeling good and they were more productive. And they called this the Batman effect, that thinking of yourself as someone other than who you are massively sort of changes the way you approach something. And so I do this, for example, like these glasses are fake. I don't actually need glasses because I've had LASIK a few years ago. But I just kind of, kept on wearing them because putting on my fake glasses, like whenever I'm on camera or anything or giving a talk, I put the fake glasses on because I step into so for me, the Batman is young Professor X from the X-Men series. And he's like a really good teacher and like he's really good at explaining stuff and he's like a nice guy and he's got like telekinetic powers and that's pretty freaking cool. But I just sort of put the glasses on and I'm like, okay, I'm in that mode. I'm in the mode of kind of just, it's not about me. It's about what's the message I can share that would help. I think of any listener or whatever, a viewer as being a student. Like if I were a teacher teaching some students, what I've learned along the way, just sharing some ideas, what would that look like? And that to me looks like young Professor X.
I
fake glasses.
love this.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Wasn't there, you wrote about this. I love that this is now your persona. What we call it? Professor X.
Professor X, yeah. From
Professor
have you
X.
seen X-Men?
No.
Oh man, this reference is lost.
Man, I'm
people
not.
in the
But
audience.
I
It's
feel
like
like
Wolverine, Cyclops. Do you know Wolverine?
I mean,
Played by Hugh
I
Jackman,
know
like
who
the
they are,
claws
but
and shit, like-
I just it's not my type
So
of
Professor
vibe.
X is the guy in the wheelchair. He's like the leader of like the school for gifted and talented youngsters. And he goes around the world finding these mutants. And
Oh,
he's like
wow.
bringing them into his school and he's like coaching them and mentoring them.
And that's you.
I'd like to think so.
That is you. I mean, I'm
yeah.
now literally going to go home and watch
And then
X-Men.
there's Magneto. And like,
You're lost on me.
oh, wow.
Totally lost on me.
I've never met someone who. Okay, that's cool.
You have now.
Amazing.
But I mean, I will now go home and watch it.
It's really good.
And I'm now going to think of you. And I
Nice.
love that you. I mean, I have a similar. I don't have a persona per se, but I use it in the way I dress. And so when I'm at home,
Yeah.
I'll just be in my slacks.
Yeah.
Whereas when I want to interview somebody, or even if I need to be at home and be hyper focused and I'm writing, I will go and change my clothes. Sometimes I'll change them twice, two,
Nice.
3 times in a day to embody that persona
Yeah.
that I want to be like. Whereas I know that when I'm dressing in my yoga gear, I'm not that creative person that I want to be. And so for me, I guess that probably fits on what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
But was it Adele that you said that had Beyonce as her persona?
Yeah, so Beyonce and Adele have both had different like alter egos that they
That's
they
it.
used to get on stage. So Beyonce's I think was called Sasha Fierce, and I think that was one of her early albums, because in early on in Beyonce's career she got a lot of like stage fright and was like, I don't know, getting into her head too much. So she created this like alter ego called Sasha Fierce, and she's like, on stage, that's who I am. And then she ended up shedding it after a few years because she didn't need it anymore. But Adele also had like really bad stage fright back in the day. So she took inspiration from Beyonce and made a character called Sasha Carter, which was an amalgamation of Beyonce's Batman, Sasha Fierce, and also this country singer called June Carter, who apparently was famous. So Adele was like, cool, on stage, I am this amalgamation of like this inspirational figure that Beyonce used and also this really cool country singer. And that was who she was on stage. She was like, I'm not Adele anymore, I'm Sasha Carter. And it just changes the way you approach stuff.
So for anyone struggling with procrastination, go and make your alter ego.
Make your alter ego, yeah.
Make your avatar.
That's the one. Once the thing's on your calendar, it's got to be on the calendar
It's
first.
got to be on the calendar.
That's the first. That's the basic one. And then if you're still struggling, put it. Find your Batman. And then if you're still struggling from that, just do the thing for 5 minutes and tell yourself that's all you're going to do.
And put on some Lord of the Rings background music.
Yeah, or Pirates of the Caribbean, or have you seen Pirates of the
I
Caribbean?
have seen
Okay,
Pirates.
nice.
It's got
Just
Johnny
checking.
Depp in. 100% I've seen Pirates of the
Yeah,
Caribbean.
just anything that makes you feel uplifted. It just makes the thing a little bit more fun.
I do think we really underestimate, and I wrote this in my Members Hub newsletter today, around our different senses. We forget about sound, how that affects us emotionally. We forget about touch. We forget about scent. And all of these things can really help us. For me, actually having scent is one of the biggest things that I use to help focus.
How so?
I react really, really well to having candles and essential oils all put over my wrists and my temples.
Okay.
And I remember when I was doing my biochemistry exam, and I was so terrified about not remembering. I think the thing about dyslexics that I was told is that we have a much shorter ledge than other people, so we can't retain our information as well. So for me, I can do as much studying as possible. There's only so much that's going to fit on that ledge. You'll have a much larger ledge than I will. So I've got to be really strategic about what I decide to intake in the information before an exam, because essentially it's about memory, and if I can remember it.
Yeah.
Rosemary is a really good essential oil for helping you bring back certain memories. So when I was studying in certain parts, I would always have fresh rosemary and scent around me. And then I would take it into my exam. And then I would smell it during the exam. And that helps bring back that memory.
I didn't know this was a thing for scent. This is a thing. So they've done a weird study where they got people to prepare for a test. And then they got another group to prepare for the test underwater. Like this was a group of divers. And they were just like, prepare for the test underwater. So they had like waterproof, like whatever.
I'd love to see that.
And then they got them to do the test. And then one group did it on land and the other group did it underwater. And they found that if you studied underwater and did the test underwater, or if you studied on land and did the test on land, you performed better than if you studied underwater and did the test on land, or studied on land and did the test underwater. Like the whole theory was that if you can mimic the conditions of the test in the same way that you're studying or preparing for the test, you're more likely to perform. So when you have rosemary on your table while studying, and then you also have it during the test, that's like queuing up all these funky parts of the memory.
Yeah, all these scent cues.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
think, yeah. So there we go.
I'm going to do that with scent. That's a good idea.
Do.
Yeah.
And
I'll try
like
it out.
loads of candles. Environment's a huge thing, but scent I find is really, really important. So you might see why I'm doing this, because it's like parts of my memory from everything I've researched. But coming on to that as well, like the emotional aspects, I do find it's something that I'm very passionate about, mental health and understanding this. The 10-10-10 rule.
Oh, yeah.
I love this. Talk to us about how, because it's a lot about reframing.
Yeah, this is this is a classic thing they teach in therapy in various schools, where it's like if you're worried about something, you sort of ask yourself, I like to think 10-10-10. Will this actually matter in 10 minutes? Okay, maybe it will. Will it matter in 10 weeks? Will it matter in 10 years? There's almost nothing that we can do that will matter in 10 weeks or in 10 years. Maybe it'll matter in 10 minutes. But I find that just like running through those helps me realize, even like, for example, this New York Times bestseller fixation that I had that was stopping me from like making progress on my book. Will this matter in 10 weeks to 10 weeks afterwards? Yeah, maybe it will. Will it matter in 10 years? Like, no one cares what was on the New York Times bestseller list in like 2014. Like, who gives a toss? Like, no one cares. It's like, oh, okay. That relieves some of the pressure. Because I think a lot of procrastination and distraction and issues with productivity stem from the pressure that we place on ourselves. If the stakes are very high, this is, we talk about this in the play chapter. If the stakes are high, it's very hard to feel playful about the thing. If the stakes are high, we get a stress response, an anxiety response, we get the adrenaline, we get the cortisol. All of these things cause us to contract and like, I need to focus on this one thing. And that sort of tunnel vision doesn't actually improve your performance in most things in life. One of the theories that the book is sort of based around is a theory called the broaden and build theory. And the idea there is that essentially when we experience positive emotions, it like expands our scope of actions and it expands our vision and our awareness. And if you sort of imagine back in caveman times, if the caveman and their crew were feeling positive emotions, life is good. They're pretty safe. There's no lion about to attack them. There's no neighboring tribe about to attack them. And so they evolve naturally to explore their surroundings a bit more and to be friendly with each other and build those social resources and stuff. But if they're experiencing negative emotions, stress or anxiety, that's because there's some kind of threat, some kind of lion or some kind of attacking tribe. And in that context, you don't want that caveman to be thinking, let me explore my surroundings. You want them to be thinking, I need to fight, flight, or freeze. I just need to do this like one or two series of actions. So that's the kind of mind that we have. Unfortunately, the world has changed, but our mind hasn't really changed with it. To the point that when we experience negative emotions now, we still think of it as our survival is being threatened. So if you're feeling immense pressure with a work task or something, or like, oh, I've got to give this presentation and like my colleagues might laugh at me or whatever, that to the mind feels like it's a threat to your survival. And in that context, you might have a freeze response of like, I can't bring myself to do this thing. And that's where a lot of procrastination comes from. And so whatever we can do to reduce the stakes and to remind ourselves, no one cares. This is not going to matter in 10 months or 10 weeks or 10 years or whatever the thing might be. Let me just get started. I'll see how it goes. Let me treat it like an experiment rather than a big serious thing. Let me be less serious and more sincere. Like there's all of these different reframings that we can use to just lower the stakes a little bit. Because even when it's life and death, right? Like, I've been in operating theaters quite a lot where a patient is bleeding out. Literally there's a life-saving operation going on. They still have background music. They still crack jokes, like the surgeons and the nurses and the staff and all of that stuff, because they realize that even when life and death is on the line, there is a sense of lightness that actually improves your performance rather than takes away from it. And so I just try and remember that whenever I'm sort of struggling with something, whether it's procrastinating or feeling I'm losing focus. It's like, let's just reduce the seriousness of this thing in my mind.
There's a lot around that, though, on self-kindness to yourself, right? Yeah. And forgiveness. Yeah. And being imperfect is to be human, right? And that's what falls under self-compassion. It's those three things. Do you ever think about self-compassion during kind of all the built of success and kind of, I guess, your next 10 years of your goals you've got ahead, on how that sits within it? Because I know you mentioned mental health there. And one of the things that I loved in your book that you wrote was the greatest cause of burnout isn't exhaustion, it's low mood. So something that resonates with me when I read that was self-compassion sits at a lot of that around acceptance. Acceptance of that wasn't perfect.
Yep.
Acceptance of that went wrong.
Yep.
Self-kindness.
Yeah.
Right? How you would probably say to me, Sarah, if you're going to write your book, be kind to yourself. You don't need to be doing all of these things. As opposed to what I would say to myself is, I need to be doing this. I need to make sure I'm prepping this much. I need to make sure I'm going to get a bestseller. And all that pressure then goes on me, as opposed to I wouldn't say that to a friend. It's not how I would speak to you writing your book. So much within that sits at self-compassion.
Yeah, we were talking about this before recording. I love this like self-compassion idea. It's not a phrase I think about very often, but like now that you're mentioning it, there's a few things that I found over the years that really help, which I guess tie into self-compassion. Well, one of them is I realized that often at the end of a work day or at the end of any kind of day, I would have a tendency to sort of beat myself up that I didn't do enough. Oh, I didn't wake up early enough, or I didn't get enough sleep, or I didn't like do this enough, or I didn't actually manage to get to the gym, or I did go to the gym, but I skipped the final set of the freaking leg press, or whatever the thing was. I could have been more productive. And I realized after a while that this is just completely pointless in that the day is over. I can't change what's happened in the day. So me choosing to beat myself up about it is literally just adding pain to my life for no benefit. And I was like, oh no, but it's important because it makes me more motivated the next day. It's like, no, it doesn't. I'm not motivated by like the stick or by kind of beating myself up or whipping myself for not having done enough yesterday. That's like a very, it's a form of motivation called introjected motivation. We can go into that, but it's a very kind of, it's not a very feel good form of motivation. It's a very kind of like, drill sergeant in the army trying to shout at you for like, stop being a pussy and just like fucking do the thing. And it's like all of those kind of narratives were in my mind for some reason. And I found that they just really weren't helpful. And if I just forgave myself and just thought, you know what, I've done what I can for the day. That's okay. Tomorrow is a new day. Then my motivation the next day was actually stronger because I felt like I'd already won the previous day. Whereas it's really hard to come back from a loss. If you feel like you're losing, then there's so much effort to be like, oh God, okay, now I'm really going to win. And you get all these stories of like, sports teams and like wars and stuff. It's like, we're in the middle of a battle and we are losing and now we can give it our all and stuff. But it's so much easier to be on a winning streak. It's like, oh, we're 3-0 up. Great, we can have more fun with this. Let's just keep going. Yep, 4-0, 5-0. Great, we're having a great time. Life is good. It's really hard to come back from a losing streak. And we create these losing streaks for ourselves by flagellating ourselves with all this self-talk around like, you didn't do enough or you weren't enough or why'd you screw that up, you freaking idiot, and all of those things. And I guess I realized it was counterproductive, so I stopped doing it. But I guess that's what self-compassion looks like.
It is. It's basically to know that you're imperfect. That is to be human, right? Whereas so much I think about what is now projected in society is the perfect lives. Everyone's always succeeding. And I think that already creates such a huge conflict within oneself. And so to actually kind of reflect and step back from that and actually give yourself self-kindness. If you'd have looked back on yourself 5 years ago and seen when you are today, you'd be hyper impressed. You'd be like, I am flying.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm sure at the moment there's these things in your mind that are niggling of thinking, oh, I should have done this and I should have done that and I really wanted to achieve X. And there might not be, but kind of our natural domain is to go more towards the things that are pessimistic than optimistic. You might be more likely to remember things that went wrong in your day than things that went right in your day.
One of the habits that I found most difficult to stick to, but it's just been so transformational, is doing like a weekly review. So I did my...
I love them.
Oh, mate, weekly reviews. So I did mine for this week yesterday, because yesterday was a Sunday. And the first question is, review, what were my accomplishments from the last week? And I thought about it. I was like, I don't really know. And then I looked at my calendar and I was like, oh, I was in New York last week, and then I went on Good Morning America, and that was fun. And then I had this meeting with my team, which was really good. And then I had this call with a friend from Twitter who turned out to be really nice. And then I had dinner with Ani and Yusuf, and then I had, one more dinner with friends. Then I had lunch with my publishers, and I had this. And I came up with a list from like 28 things that happened like last week that I just completely forgotten about. And it took the weekly review for me to be like, oh yeah, we hit the New York Times, we hit the Sunday Times. I actually completely forgot about that because we're so used to like,
the next thing,
or like focusing on the negative or whatever. It's so weirdly hard to celebrate the wins, and there's always wins in every week, even if it's not like
one of my biggest things that since meeting my partner that he's made me initiate is celebration of every small win.
Nice.
So everything, and there might have been something where something came in at 11 p.m. And he will make sure that we'll do something in that moment to register that's happened. And sometimes I'm like, I'm exhausted, I don't really want to, and he's like, no, because if you don't do it now, you'll forget about it. And I think that's so important that it's really changed my mindset to actually take that moment to be grateful and aware that I've done something that's quite good.
Yeah.
As opposed to waiting and going, oh, wait, what was it? Oh, yeah, I think I did that. Because you never have the same response emotionally as you do in that moment.
Yeah. Oh, man. There was last year, I happened to spend time with a guy called Bill Perkins, who's written a book called Die with Zero. It's a book about how to make the most from your money and your life and stuff. This guy's like a billionaire. He made his fortunes in like oil or something, and then super, super rich. And he is like, he describes himself as one of the few rich people he knows who are rich and also happy, because most people who are very rich seem to be pretty miserable, apparently. But I asked him, what are some things that you would go back and tell yourself? And he kind of said two things. He said, thing number one I would tell my younger self is get a relationship therapist. Even if you think you don't need it, a fucking relationship therapist will completely change your life. So go get a relationship therapist. So I was like, okay, cool. So now I have a relationship therapist.
Can I just say,
yeah.
That's how we connected. You might not remember this. So you put a tweet out
Oh yeah.
saying,
Yes.
does
That
anyone
was-
know a good therapist?
That was in the aftermath. That was literally like that day. I was in
I was
Austin.
in that day.
No way. That's how we connected. Yeah.
And I said, I've got some amazing therapists and sent them to you.
Yeah. That was so good. Thank you.
That was the moment.
I spoke to one of your people, and then turns out she was an individual therapist, not a relationship therapist, because
a bit different.
Yeah.
But hopefully she
Yeah, she
knows a
connected
lot
me.
of
Yeah.
different people. Yeah,
That's so
yeah,
good.
she's amazing.
So like that was literally like June last year, and I was like, I tweeted this thing because I was like, I need a relationship therapist. So that was like thing number 1 that he said. So thank you for that. That was very kind. And thing number 2 that he said was, I would tell myself to celebrate more wins. So now what he does, with his team or his family or anything, anytime something good happens, it's just an excuse to like take people out for lunch or like throw a party or like anything, even if it's small. Because what he said is that he's in like his 50s now and he's got like kids and things. And he's like, yeah, what you realize is that the time's always going to go by. And if you don't celebrate the wins, then like, what's the point?
Well, what is the point?
Yeah.
And that is exactly what my partner said to me.
Mm.
And now it's really changed my initiative.
Yeah.
Because you might not celebrate it a week later.
Yeah.
You need to go and your book. It was today, right? You found out.
Today, Sunday Times, yeah, like 2 days ago, New York Times. Yeah.
Okay. Did you
Need
do
to
anything to
that.
celebrate?
Not really, actually.
You need to celebrate
Need to
that.
celebrate that.
How often in your life are you going to get that again?
Yeah, that's true. Shit, you're right.
It's really
So
important.
I was just like, on to the next thing. Yeah, flying back to London. Yeah, we got a podcast, doing a talk, etc., etc.
It is therapy because I find you hugely inspiring for a huge amount of reasons. It's not just one thing that I can see for so many things on how you've started your company, your dedication, there's so many things that people look up to you for and find you as an inspiration. But something that I really find inspiring is your vulnerability. And I don't know how many people have said that to you before, but you are incredibly vulnerable. And I think it's hard to sometimes be vulnerable with ourselves, let alone to do it publicly, build a company publicly, talk about that, talk about your loss, talk about your failures. And so I think that's hugely inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
And so I really wanted to bring on the topic of therapy because that is how we connected.
Yeah.
And I loved that you tweeted that first of all. Just seeing that was one of the things that made me want to reach out to you.
Oh, no way. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I just
because I
tweeted it
was
without really
like-
thinking. I was like,
But I was like, I
let's
love
get recommendations.
the amount of people that message me that go, I'm asking for a friend, but do you know a good therapist? And that's even just a direct message to me that, and I really understand the barrier to why people feel ashamed around it. There's huge stigma in society, sadly, still. But you just openly tweeted it to your massive platform. And I was like, I have so much respect for you. And I thought I'm going straight on in with as many recommendations as I can
Nice.
find and hopefully help you and navigate to find a good relationship with a therapist. I mean, so first of all, thank you just for being so vulnerable.
No, thank you for messaging me.
And having that. But what was your objective and what's kind of been the outcome since you've started that therapy?
Oh, man.
Because-
Yeah. Oh, I love this topic. I don't think I've ever talked about this. This is good. So I then, after that conversation with Bill Perkins and your recommendation, so I got a relationship therapist and also an individual therapist. So the relationship therapist has been like super, super, super interesting. Because like my girlfriend and I weren't really having anything that we would describe like problems in the relationship. But I just heard the recommendation where it's like, bro, if you want to, the relationship is like the most important thing in your life. Therefore, why would you not have a therapist/coach to guide you through that? And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's so true. Like I say this to people when it comes to business, that if you're running a business, you're just dumb to not have a business coach. Because like, why would you just not have a coach? They just save so much time and money by virtue of the fact that they have seen the mistakes you're going to make and will stop you from making those mistakes. And so I was immediately sold on the relationship therapist. And essentially, the strategies that we've learned during those sessions still come back. Like sometimes I'll mention it during our conversations where it's mostly around communication. Sounds weird to say. But
No,
it's
it doesn't. It's the
yeah.
biggest barrier.
Yeah,
I think
I mean,
the
that's
biggest
true.
problem in relationships is communication.
Yeah, we saw this relationship therapist in person on like Harley Street or something, and then we kind of moved to a guy over Zoom. But the guy in person was really good. He was his whole thing was like he would give he had this like little stick. If I use the pen as a, and it was like, okay, when one of you is going to speak, so you get the speaking stick. And so if I was speaking and we were in a relationship therapy session, I'd be speaking and be like, okay, so when you did X, it kind of made me feel blah, 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 blah. And literally after 10 seconds, he would stop me and he would be like, okay, it's your turn. What did you hear him say? And then you would say, oh, the thing I heard you say was blah, 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 blah. And you're like, is that true? I'd be like, well, yeah, 80%, but actually you misunderstand me because whatever. Continue. And it was like the conversation, he interrupted the conversation so many times just to get the other person to reflect back what they were hearing. And it was stupidly helpful. Initially, I was like, come on, like this is a bit excessive. But just hearing firsthand the Chinese whispers that were going on even between the two of us, where I was saying something where she got the wrong idea, or she said something where I interpreted it in the way that was not, that she didn't intend. We were just like, bloody hell, like we should do this more often. So now the strategy that we do sometimes is if it's a sort of conflict type conversation, one of us will often pause to be like, hey, just so I know that I've explained myself properly, would you mind reflecting back like what you heard me say? And this is a strategy that we used to use in medicine as well. If you're sort of breaking bad news to someone, or you're trying to explain something really complex, after a while you say, hey, just so I can check that I've explained things correctly, can you tell me what you understand from this conversation? And initially you think, oh, I can possibly say that, like it's patronizing, like why would they want to repeat themselves? And then the patient replies, or the spouse replies, and you're like, whoa, yes, that's actually spot on, or actually no, there's a crucial piece that's missing. So that was just one of the strategies that we came up with, we didn't come up with, that we went through in therapy, that was super helpful and continues to be helpful to this day.
I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because sometimes you could even have that conversation with yourself. And then that's why it's because you can sometimes take what you want to see and interpret. And it's so important when you're two essentially completely different humans coming together with so much baggage on each side. I don't say so much baggage like all this trauma, but it's, you've both had your own lives, which has drawn your own inspiration and your own traumas and your own scars.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of coming together. And that's where that communication, I guess, is so essential. Yeah. Because if somebody doesn't feel seen, that's when a lot of conflict can start happening. Because there's a lot of frustration there. And so I think being seen is one of the biggest things in a relationship.
That's the one.
That's so important.
Like the other thing that we found super helpful was talking on the level of needs. Like, it's like, sure, I felt blah, blah, blah. But like, and previously we would say, I felt blah, blah, blah when you did that. I was like, okay, cool. But then the level up is, I felt blah, blah, blah when you did that. And the need that I have that I felt was unmet in that situation is my need to feel connection, or my need to feel freedom, or my need to feel love. And it's like, oh, okay. And then it's like, okay, what might I do that would help meet that need? Mm-hmm. So with my girlfriend, for example, one thing that happened fairly early on in our relationship is she felt disconnected because I wouldn't hug her when we would see each other in public. Mm-hmm. And for me, like the sort of cultural, somewhat conservative background I was raised in, it's like, you never see like, husband and wife or like partners like hugging each other like in a public, like for goodness sake, that's so not classy or whatever. It just wouldn't be done. And I was like, oh shit, like for her, it's like, that's a, important form of connection. And then I had to decide, it's like, is this a thing that I would like to do to help my partner feel more connected? Or would I like to actually be like, you know what, this is not for me. And I decided, actually, I'm not that wedded to my cultural conditioning on that front. And I'm very happy to give her a hug when we meet. And now we hug when we meet, and it's kind of nice. And I just didn't realize that was a thing. But it took her explaining to be like, hey, actually, it would help meet my need for connection if you would give me a hug. And I was like, oh, is that all it takes? Perfect. Of course I can do that. It's easy enough.
Have you heard about love languages?
Oh, of course, yeah. Absolutely.
I'm like, hers
love
must
that
be
stuff.
touch.
Yeah. Yeah, hers is touch and quality time.
What's
Mine
yours?
is acts of service. If someone makes me a cup of tea, I'm just like, oh, so good. So thank you for making me that cappuccino.
But you're welcome. But I think that's actually a really key thing in a relationship. Understand. That's another form of communication. Yeah. It's just your love and how you communicate.
Yeah.
It's so essential.
Yeah. Oh, on that note, I just keep talking about couples therapy. One of the things that really came out of couples therapy as well was how different people have essentially different thresholds for connection. So, my partner would be saying things like to the therapist, I feel like Ali doesn't love me because he doesn't ... And he'd be like, no, hang on, like, feeling like Ali doesn't love you, that's there's too much that goes into that. Like, what specifically is the need, and what specifically is the way that it's not being met? And she would say, well, I have a need for connection, and I feel like the fact that he's just content to chill on his laptop when we're in the same room means that, to me, that need for connection is not met. And I feel like he doesn't like me because of it, because, like, I want to connect with him. And then he asked me, Ali, what does it take to meet your need for connection? And I was like, oh man, I feel so connected when we're on the laptop together and on the same Wi-Fi. We're both in the same room. Like, maybe we've got some background music and we're both doing our own thing on our respective laptops. I just feel so connected because it feels like that's such profound acceptance, because it's like we don't need to do anything. We're just together and we're doing our own thing and life is good. And he was like, see, he feels very connected when we're both on your laptops, but you clearly don't. So, like, what are the things he could do to help you feel more connected? And she was like, well, in that context, maybe every half an hour or so, he just comes up and like pats me on the head, or like, asks me how my work is going. I was like, oh, is that it? I can do that. That's so easy. So I make it a point every half an hour to just like get up, sort of ruffle her hair a little bit and be like, hey, how's it going?
I was like, please don't pat on her head.
Yeah, yeah.
Please give her a kiss. It's like a dog.
Yeah.
How are you doing
Like,
there?
stroke the hair a bit, kiss on the forehead, that kind of thing. And that
And
meets
she
a
can
need
make
for
you a cup
connection.
of tea.
Yeah.
Acts of service.
Exactly, that's the one.
I mean, that is kind of understanding that. And I think, it's important for couples therapy, but it's important, I think, in any relationship. I guess understanding that about people around you, about the needs with your best friends, your family, all of those things kind of fall under the same umbrella in that sense.
Yeah, my CEO coach actually has a good way of doing this. One of the pieces of homework that he sent me in our first session, he was like, okay, I need you to make a list of all the key relationships in your life. So like girlfriend, brother, mum, grandma, sister-in-law, that kind of thing. And the first question was one that I had to answer, which was, what is one thing that if I did more frequently or more often or better would improve the relationship? I was like, okay. So I thought about it, and for each of these relationships, I came up with something that if I did more often or better, it would improve the relationship. And then the harder piece of homework was to ask that person, to be like, hey, Tamar, my brother, it's going to sound weird, but my CEO coach to make me do this. I had to do all the caveats so I'd feel better about it. Just as a thought experiment, what is one thing that I could do if I did more often or better would improve our relationship? And he was like, interesting. I guess we could get back to doing our podcast weekly. I was like, cool, let's do that. And we still haven't managed to do it weekly, but like it was useful to know that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very tangible, practical thing. This guy coaches CEOs of like huge ass companies and also me. And he's found that like usually any problem in anyone's business can be traced down to a problem in their personal lives. And if we just ask the people who are closest to us, what's one thing I could do to make our relationship better? No one asks that, but it leads to some pretty interesting answers.
Well, because it can bruise your ego.
Yeah. Feels scary.
It feels terrible. It's so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you've really got to look at yourself. I mean, without going into having to tell me what everyone said, did you see a common denominator that came up there? Were you kind of like, this is kind of what a lot of people are saying the same thing, or was it all different?
Yeah, no, it was all quality time.
It was all quality time.
It was all basically like, in my partner's case, it was more appreciation because we already spent enough quality time together. But it was like, I want you to give me praise and appreciation or like compliments or something more often. I was like, oh, okay. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, I can do that. But with all the other relationships, it was like, yeah, quality time. And I realized that like, when with a lifestyle where there's a lot going on, it's so easy to neglect the important relationships by not giving them the time that they're due, that they warrant. Because there's always another interview to do or another talk to give or another video to make or another ... to sort out. And the thing with work is that work is like this black hole of like the problem is like I wonder if you have this as well. When you're doing something that you really like, it's more of a problem to stop doing the thing than it is to keep doing the thing.
100%.
Like I guess a lot of people, at least a lot of people in my audience, really struggle with their work because they're not doing something that they love, and so they're always like, how do I stop procrastinating? And I guess for me, it's more like, now how do I actually get myself to stop working and go and hang out with my family? Because like otherwise, my default would be to just keep on working because it's just so fun.
Yeah. I think I started thinking about this a lot about 2 years ago. And I think I started thinking about this a lot before and then didn't really have the emotional capacity to understand it when I was living in New York, when I was in my early 20s, when I was completely disconnected from my life. I think back in the UK, I was kind of in this whirlwind of the high fashion industry and, success at an early age. And my gosh, I've got all this financial income and I can do what I want and I've got all this freedom. And recently I've started to really think about actually, how do I want people to think about me when I'm 90? What do I want to have achieved? And I actually asked this question to Shane Parrish, who came on the show, because he asks this to all of his guests. And I was finding it really interesting to kind of reframe it back to him. And it is one of those things that when you're 19, you're sitting on a bench. What do you want the people around you to say about you? And it entwines really well to that question of where you've asked people what they want more from you. But how would you want people to remember you when you're 90? What would you want people that loved you to say about you?
It's funny you mention this. I actually do an exercise every few months, which is where I write out my own obituary, which is often fun and interesting to do. And I ran a workshop online yesterday for everyone who pre-ordered my book, where we kind of everyone wrote their obituary.
Wow.
And the Zoom chat was just like, people were like, oh my God, I'm crying, like I'm sobbing, I've never done this before. So one thing I would encourage anyone listening to this to do is if you're interested in figuring out what to do with your life, thinking about what you'd want people to say at your funeral or what you'd want written about you when you're dead. It's actually a really powerful way of finding that North Star
100%.
and saying, am I on track? So for me, I think of it as sort of like relationships and then work, because it's like, mostly the thing I'd want people to say about me at my funeral or when I'm 90 is, he was really warm and friendly and humble and kind, and was always there for his family and for his friends and the people and the people who needed him. And even though he had all this like whatever success flying around the world and doing all that crap, he always stayed connected to his family and to the people around him who he loved and who loved him. And if that can be the thing that people say about me when I'm 90 on a bench or when I'm dead, then I'd be like, nice, that was a life well lived.
That leads me into my final question, which I ask all of my guests, and I'm wondering if it's gonna be the same answer. But I want to know, Ali, what does live well, be well mean to you?
There's a question I often think of, which is like, if I won the lottery, how much would it change about how I'm spending my time? And I want the answer to that question to be as close to nothing as possible. Like, if I win the lottery and I wouldn't change a thing about how I spend my time, that means that I'm really living true to what I want to do rather than chasing money or status or fame or all those things, I hope. And so I often think about that to be like, what's the gap between the lottery winning version of myself and the current version of myself? And like, how do I bridge that gap? If I won the lottery, would I care so much about what people think? Probably not. If I won the lottery, would I make videos about things I want to make videos about, or would I make videos about things I want the algorithm will do well on? Probably I'd make videos about what I want to make videos about. If I won the lottery, would I continue to run online courses? Probably not. Oh shit, I'm running online courses at the moment. Okay, let's think about that. Let's if I won the lottery, would I take care of my health? Yeah, of course I would. Okay, cool. That's good. And just that specific question of if I won the lottery, would I ... helps me get to a place that I think kind of congregates on this idea of live well, be well.
And so what would you do if you won the lottery?
Broadly what I'm doing now, honestly. I'd still make videos about things that I learn and find interesting. I would still write books. I would probably do less online course type stuff that I'm doing, but I'm kind of winding that stuff down anyway. And I would do more teaching in real life, like events and stuff. And I asked myself this question like at the start of the year when I was setting my goals for 2024. And I was like, what's stopping me from doing more real life events? Nothing. Let's just do them. So now it's a thing that we're working towards for this year, because I haven't really done many real life events, but I went to a Tony Robbins seminar last couple of months ago. I was super inspired. It's like freaking sick. And I was like, whoa, it'd be so cool to do like a weekend workshop on like goal setting, or like a weekend workshop on productivity or something like that. And it's like you can have like little yoga breaks and meditation breaks and like get speakers in. It would be so much fun.
Ali, thank you so much for coming on to Live Well, Be Well. It has been so much fun. I want to make sure that people continue to buy your book. But please, I feel like everyone should know where you are now, but please just shout out any handles where you want people to follow you.
Oh, sure,
and our
yeah.
listeners.
So you can search my name, Ali Abdaal, which will be on YouTube and all the other social platforms. Or you can click whatever links there are in the show notes or the video description. And you can check out the book. It's called Feel Good Productivity, and it's available everywhere that books are sold.
Thank you so much. It's
Thank
been
you.
so helpful, and I know it's going to be really, really helpful to many listeners.
Thanks. Appreciate it.